I'm going to talk about subsidies in the agriculture sector. As I say, it's an unfinished agenda. But first of all, let me thank to all the organizers on the audience for allowing me to be here to making this presentation. So I'm going to focus my presentation on subsidies. That is a part of the negotiation that usually is set aside in regional trade agreement, like is the case of Mercosur EU agreement, but there is room for discussion for this topic. So the subsidies discussion or subsidies regulation started with the Uruguay round with the creation of the WTO, where countries decide to set a limit on the amount of subsidy that they can use to support their agriculture sector, and also decide to move on negotiation, keep on reducing and keep on cutting the amount of this domestic support for the agriculture. In 2001, we have the Doha Ministerial Conference where the Doha round started and countries start to negotiate this idea of reduced subsidy. But negotiation was very strong, very hard to get, so the negotiation was stagnated till 2015, where we have a glimpse of what we call a result, that it was the Nairobi package, where countries committed to eliminate export subsidy. That was an important part, but not the biggest part of subsidies to agriculture. And finally, this year, 2022, we have the Geneva package, where the discussion wasn't part of the table. We have, yes, an agreement on subsidy, but only for fisheries, not for the agriculture sector. So with the negotiation on the WTO stagnated, what about the other international fora where this kind of issues can be discussed? For instance, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which a specific mention on the goal number 2, that is zero hunger, where they push forward, they try to correct and prevent trade restriction and distortions in world agriculture market. We can assume that domestic support is part of this agenda, but again, they derivated that to the Doha development round that, as we said, is stagnating. What about the G20? G20 is the biggest forum, or at least the most important forum these days. Well, it's not part of the agenda. Even though agriculture sector and agriculture discussions are part of the agenda, the specific part of subsidies doesn't appear in any statement, in any declaration since 2008 to today. So this is a topic to take into account. Meanwhile, OECD has shown us how support to agriculture has reached a new record in this year, the 3-year 2019-2021, in comparison to 2018-2020, an increase of 13%, especially given off the situation of the pandemic. But here is not taking into account the situation in Ukraine. So we are expecting that this increase could be even more in the future. And what are the countries that are subsidizing the most? Well, in the past, developed countries were responsible for most of the 80% of the subsidies amount, but nowadays, developing countries with China, Indonesia, Turkey, and some others are the ones that are increasing a lot the use of this type of measures. We can see this in these slides, where developed countries have reduced the use of this type of subsidies, but still remain very, very important for the amounts of domestic support. And this, while I was preparing my presentation, this report came up a couple of days ago, with a couple of very important international organizations, that they start talking about that is needed a more broad-based cooperation on subsidies. We are all agree on that, but then they say that governments should work expeditiously to clarify and strengthen international disciplines around subsidies, while recognizing that the important role that well-designed subsidies can play in some circumstances. It's very important, this change of language. Keep on that, because in FAO we have the same idea.
En la FAO tenemos esta misma idea de cambiar los objetivos de las subvenciones, pero no de reducirlos. Así que ahora estamos hablando de una readaptación.
For countries like ours in the past. So we have this report from 2021, well, this multi-billion-dollar opportunity with a focus mostly on environmental issues. And this year, with the state of food insecurity, the repurposing again is part of the language, but now is about changing the foods to the consumers. So changing from some types of products that are being subsidized, for instance, cereals and cattle, to another products like fruits. So again, this concept of repurposing than eliminating the subsidies. And what about regional trade agreements? Regional trade agreements are not the place where subsidies are discussed. Most of the regional trade agreements directly say that all the subsidies must be in order or must be conformed to the provision of WTO. So as we see, WTO is stagnated. So some other address this topic and say that we have to reduce agricultural subsidy, but there are no commitments on that. So it's very hard to find a place to discuss these kind of topics. There are some free trade agreements that are trying to go beyond the WTO rules, containing, for instance, provision disciplining the behavior of state-owned enterprises, or trying to create a list of prohibited subsidies, but are the least. And what about Mercosur EU? That is the one that we are talking in this seminar. Well, they have a part, the agreement have a part, a specific part on subsidies, with some principles that, let me quote, it said subsidy can be granted by a party when they are necessary to achieve a public policy objective. The parties acknowledge, however, that certain subsidies have the potential to distort the proper functioning of markets and undermine the benefits of trade liberalization. And then they open to cooperation, in order to coordinate positions and proposals on WTO to improve transparency. That is a very important issue in this kind of measures. Make some analysis of the impact, and finally to exchange information. But again, there are no commitment to reduce or to eliminate this kind of measures. And let me finish with these final remarks. WTO has not made significant progress, especially in domestic support, because as we see in regarding export subsidy, we have some outcomes during Nairobi, and this is important. The standstill of the dispute settlement body make very difficult the discussion of subsidies, because without an appellation body, we cannot have a resolution on a discussion regarding subsidies if we want to go to the WTO to discuss this. The issue is not part of the G20 agenda, and the negotiation to reduce and eliminate has moved its axis to repurposing. Regional trade agreements do not regulate them or refers directly to WTO, and EU and Mercosur is part of this trend. Meanwhile, trade conflicts, the war, and the COVID pandemic have led to an increase in agricultural subsidies. Let me finish with this, and I'm open to all the questions that you may have. Thank you very much.